guys, M-Tech Guy here. It's a beautiful day today and we're heading out today to meet with a guy called Melvin. He's got an E60 M5, so we're going to go and check that out today, and also his son's got a very interesting E30. So come along with me today while we go and check out these machines together. Alright, this is Melvin's E60 M5. It's a 2006 Japanese import, a bit like my own. It's done 88,000 kilometers, so pretty low Ks. So Melvin was saying he hasn't done the rod bearings on this so far, but with the mileage getting up there now, close to 100,000, something he's planning to do in the near future. Now, in the 4 years that he's owned it, he hasn't really had any issues with it in that time. The only thing that did crop up is not long after he'd bought it, he was experiencing some noise from the rear end, from the differential, while making sharp turns. Now, this is very typical of an E60 M5, especially when they've been sitting around for a little while. And of course, they've got an old school limited slip diff setup with the clutch plates. But anyhow, he returned it to the dealer just to mention what he was experiencing with the rear end of the car. They changed out the oil, no questions asked, put a little bit of additive in there, and it's been all good ever since. And he was also fortunate enough that the dealer changed out the clutch on the car not long before he bought it. So a very well looked after example that's been relatively problem free during his ownership, which is great to hear. It's a very, very tidy condition, white with the black merino leather, nice contrast. It's fantastic condition. So it's all original. The only modification that he has made is put an Android based screen in there. So with it being a Japanese import like my own, obviously the navigation doesn't work. Usually the Bluetooth doesn't work either, so that gives him them features. Now, this is just an eBay unit that he bought. It's got Google Maps, so it's got one of the best navigation systems on it. You can use the Bluetooth. It'll take a memory card for all his music, and this just piggybacks off the back of the standard BMW system, so you can still scroll through it and get to the regular iDrive setup. So it's a cool wee feature, especially for a Japanese import over here in New Zealand. It's an extremely tidy example. The paint's really nice, the leather's really nice, still smells like a new car inside. Just have a look in the engine bay there. And again, super tidy, all original. Very, very nice. Great to see another local E60 M5. This certainly hasn't been messed with. It's certainly been well looked after over its lifetime. Alright, so what's the story with this one then? So Melvin was originally looking for an E90 M3, and he'd looked at a few locally here, and the price point that he was looking at, they were all pretty ropey condition, not very well looked after, not the sort of thing he was wanting to get into even at the price point he was looking at. So the search continued, and he went to a local dealer here, and he came across this one just by chance. And after looking around the vehicle, he soon changed his mind and decided he wanted an E60 M5. Now, the dealer that he bought it from actually turned out to be the same dealer that I bought mine from. And if you've seen my previous video of me telling the story of when I purchased my E60 M5, I mentioned that mine was one of 4 on the lot. Well, this was one of the 4, so he'd picked this up about a year after mine. It had sat there for a little while. The other 3 had gone, mine being one of the other 3. And when I'd first gone to look at mine before I bought it, obviously it was out of action because they were doing some work on it, and the salesman took me for a driving one, and this was the one. This was the one he took me for driving. So this was the car, the first E60 M5 that I'd ever sat in, that I'd ever been in, and this is the one that convinced me that I wanted an E60 M5, and obviously it's the exact same car that convinced Melvin. So he's got himself a very tidy example here. He's very happy with it. He hasn't done a huge amount of kilometers in the 4 years that he's owned it. Sounds like he's been on a few club runs with it. Picked up the odd stone chip here, unfortunately, but that's just the roads here in New Zealand, unfortunately. But very nice example. Super cool to see another E60 M5 locally here, and very interesting that it came from the same place that I bought mine from. Now it sounds like there's a few BMWs in the family. Melvin's had an E46 in the past. They did a manual swapping. He's done it himself. And his son's got a very interesting E30, which we'll go and check out next. Yes, very nice E60 M5. All right, this is Leo's E30. Very interesting, this one. He's done a lot of work to it. This has been M52 swapped, engine out of an E36. Now he's owned his car since he was 16. Sounds like he's spent a few years, the last 4 years, working on this one, modifying it, but it's all very sensible mods. A lot of it's very period correct. Very cool engine swap with the M52. So this started life with an M20 straight 6, 2 litre. And this originally came from South Africa. Now, South African ones had a few different features to the European ones and the ones sold down here in this part of the world in New Zealand. So the South African ones came with a sump guard. Now the original sump guard was missing from this one, so Leo's had one fabricated. It's very much needed with this car sitting much lower than standard. It also came with a much bigger fuel tank and a bigger toolkit with some extra tools on board. And this one also came with the lined interior boot lid. It's got the liner rather than the bare steel, so it does finish it off nicely. So it's in very honest condition, this car. There's no real corrosion. The paint's pretty straight. It's got a few age-related marks here and there. The car's over 30 years old, so it's only to be expected. It hasn't been fully restored, just modified with the engine swap. And Leo's added a few extra bits here and there that's just finished it off nicely. Got an M-Tech, a genuine M-Tech rear spoiler. Got some nice Recaro fishnets in here, very period correct. Now, I picked these up used, not sure what vehicle they came out of, if they were sold new in a different type of vehicle or if they were just direct from Recaros from back in the day, but these have got the rails for an E30, so they were just a bolt-in plug and play, but they look really nice and they do finish it off nicely. So yeah, spent 4 years working on this one. So he originally bought it, the original engine wasn't in it, and the M52 was supplied with the vehicle, but it was just loose, it wasn't in the vehicle, so him and his father just put it loose in the engine bay there, and they towed it back home, and they started work on the conversion. This one's a 1988. I'll take a look at this engine, eh? So M52 out of an E36, 2.8 litre, twin cam with a single fan house. So what's the story with this one then? So like I say, the engine was loose from the vehicle when they bought it. The original engine wasn't in the vehicle, the original M20. So once they got it home, they start working away. So they built some of the wiring harness and basically modified it all to fit together. So it's partially E36 wiring harness at the engine and then ties into the original E30 wiring harness. And what they've done, they've relocated the battery to the boot, because this was originally a 320i, which would have had the battery in the engine compartment there. Now it does fit, it is a tight fit, but to enable it to fit, I had to locate the radiator fan on the front side of the radiator there, so I just got a pusher fan on there, an aftermarket unit. Now this one's running an E36 ECU, so originally they sent the original one that came with the engine to someone in New Zealand here to get reflashed to work with the E30, but the chip couldn't be written to, so in the end they supplied a new ECU, a new E36 ECU that was completely written to suit this setup, the E30 with this M52 engine swap. So it's had the EWS delete, the oxy sensors have been deleted also, and the rev limiter has been lifted to 7,000 RPMs. It's also got the 5-speed ZF gearbox manual out of the E36 also. This originally would have been an automatic. So gearbox and engine have been swapped out, and along with the engine and gearbox, it's got 5-stud conversion front an E36 5-stud conversion on the rear. The rears are out of a E36 compact. It's got this beautiful BBS wheels. Now these are off an E38. He's had the lips polished. These would have originally been painted, and originally they came with just the push-on centre caps, the BMW ones. Now just to make it match up with the E30 look, Leo's had these BBS style hex centre caps 3D printed, so he did all the CAD work himself, and he sent these off to a company in New Zealand here, had them 3D printed, and they look really nice, especially with the BBS badges on there. It does really finish it off nicely, and it just fits in with the period of the car. It looks awesome. It's got XYZ coilovers front and rear, and you had to have them custom made, so they're basically partially E30 and partially E36. So they'll fit the hubs, but also marry up to the body where they bolt in. So interesting setup. It is sitting nice and low. These things did ride pretty high from the factory, so it does give it a bit of a better look the way it's sitting now, especially on them wheels. Very nice. Now the body was in reasonably good shape when they got it, but there was a bit of rust on the door here. It'd been sitting for quite some time, this car, for about 5 years. Some of it outside. It developed a bit of rust on the door here, so all that's been taken care of. And then obviously with it being a E30, there was rust issues in the sunroof. So Leo's had this one made up. It's a fiberglass replica. So obviously he's not going to have any trouble with that rust in the future. So he's just got it bolted in place for now. It just does need a new seal, which is going to get a factory one. Did try an aftermarket one, but it was a bit too big. Didn't fit correctly. And then he'll look at getting that painted once he gets the seal on there. So the conversion was pretty straightforward. Just bolted straight into the, I used E36 mounts, but it bolted straight into the chassis there. Same with the gearbox. Just used the cross member from the E36 and that bolted up nicely. There's a bit of rust on the exhaust. Leo was saying when he got everything finished up, he's ready to take it out for a drive, but part of the compliance process here in New Zealand, so any car that you've done modifications to this extent, you have to get the car re-complianced, and it is quite a process to go through. And one of the things they picked up on was, because it had an engine swap and obviously it's more powerful than the original engine, you have to fit drive shaft loops, which does seem a bit overkill. They are pretty tough with the rules over here. It's not like he was fitting a big block Chevy in there or something like that, but not a huge amount of horsepower more than the original. But anyhow, had to do it to get it road legal. Now at the end of the re-compliance inspection, once they're happy with everything and everything's been signed off, what they do is attach a tag somewhere on the car, and this holds all the information with regards to the inspection. Now this acts a bit like a QR code, so if you hold a mobile phone in front of it, what it'll do, it'll bring up all the information from the inspection, what it's been certified for, like modified shocks, it's been lowered, it's got a different engine, whatever, and also there'll be a selection of photos there from the inspection. So all the traceability is there to say that it's fully certified and road legal. So if you were to get pulled over by the police, all they need to do is check that tag, and that'll give them all the information they need that the car's road legal, and they're not going to be able to fine you for anything. So to get the drive shaft loops on there, I had to pull the exhaust off, and then that's when they found it was just about folding in half. So I had a custom made exhaust fitted from the manifolds to the rear. The exhaust manifold has been modified slightly. It's also got an E36 steering rack, and Leo was saying he finds it steers so much better now. It's obviously less turns from lock to lock, sharpened up the steering nicely. Would have liked an E46 purple tag steering rack, which is a common mod on these E30s here in New Zealand, but they are very expensive now. So the E36 steering rack certainly sharpened things up nicely nonetheless. And also as part of that compliance process, they got the drive shaft loops on there, and then they had it in for compliance. And basically the only other thing other than the drive shaft loops that got picked up on was they wanted to see little spring split washers on the mountings for the engine mounts and the gearbox mounts, which seemed a little bit overkill, especially because they didn't leave the factory with anything like that. So it was just a case of spending a few cents on some extra split washers, change them out, keep the compliance man happy, but of course then you've got to pay another fee to have it looked at again. So it's a pain if nothing else, but it's all road legal now, so that's all that matters. And he's done a really nice job with this, especially being such a young fella. He's done a fantastic job. I'm very impressed, so big respect to him. If we take a look in here, It's got a different gauge cluster. So he had this one put together for him over in Poland, Racing Dynamics. So if you look at the tacho there, it hasn't got the little fuel economy meter down the bottom there like the E30s did originally, and the zero starts at about 5 o'clock there, which means the red line's up at about 12 o'clock there. So visually it's really nice, that it ties in really nice. That got the chrome rings, and if we take a look over at the dash vents here, got the extra gauges there, the 3 of them. Now he bought this vent cluster online off Etsy, so super cheap. It had been 3D printed, and obviously fitted the gauges there. It's a nice wee setup. You still got your airflow there for your air conditioning. This does have air conditioning from the factory in a South African model. A lot of Japanese one came with AC also. Now he does have an original M-Tech steering wheel, but he's gone for one of these Nardi ones. Same with the matching manual gear knob. All this does tie in very nicely with the seats, the wheels and everything. It's finished really nicely. Hasn't gone overboard or mad with the modifications. It's just turned it into a very nice modified E30. So once he'd done all the work to it, just before it went for compliance, they took it out, or he took it out on the road, and it sounds like he got it around the block, or halfway around the block, quite a few times, and had a few little niggles to sort out. So they'd found that once they got it on the road, they found that there's a lot of vacuum leaks with the engine, so had to change out a lot of the hoses there. And also the fuel line had burst as well, so it sounds like he got halfway around the block a few times and then had to get it home and just rectify a few little teething issues here and there. But it's all part of the fun with anything like this. And also had some trouble with the fuel delivery from the pump, so the fuel tank was pretty rusted on the inside, which is very typical of an E30, especially from this era. And he'd been through 3 fuel pumps before he got one working. So the first one got pretty much wrecked from all the rusty flakes and whatnot. So he put a new fuel pump in there, and then actually put a aftermarket filter just in front of it. But what happened, the fuel pump pulled up all the debris out the fuel tank there, and then just basically rammed the fuel filter almost straight away, and then it killed the pump. So then he started with a 3rd pump, but before we fitted that, he pulled the fuel tank out and sent it away and had it all lined, all sorted out. So that's that problem all straightened out now. The fuel pump's doing its thing, the fuel delivery's delivering as it should do, and everything's running sweet by the sounds of it. So yes, very nice modified E30, 1988. So Leo documented pretty much the whole process on his Instagram. So what I'll do is I'll leave a link to that down in the description below, so check it out. So yeah, very nice, very cool to see father and son nice BMW collection. They've also got an E34 at home too that Melvin's done a manual swap on himself, so very interesting. So thank you very much guys for relaying the story on your 2 machines here. Alright guys, so there we have it. Now if you own a V10 M5 or M6 and you'd like to feature it on the channel and you're based here in New Zealand, shoot me an email and we'll set something up. Now if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like, and make sure you go and check out the rest of my YouTube channel for more BMW E60 M5 content. Consider subscribing if that's your cup of tea. I'm M-Tech Guy. Thanks a lot for watching.